Welcome to our deep dive into responsible AI.
Oh, this is a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it really is. And it feels like it's something that everyone's talking about, but maybe not everyone fully understands.
Right. It can definitely feel like a buzzword sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So
Well,
today we're going to try to break it down, make it practical.
absolutely.
And we're going to be looking at this paper called the Responsible AI Pattern Catalogue, a collection of best practices for AI governance and engineering.
Quite a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful,
Mhm.
but it's actually a really interesting paper because it goes beyond just like the high-level principles of RAI.
Right. It gets down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, exactly. It gives us like a roadmap for actually building AI systems that are trustworthy and beneficial for everyone.
And that's what's so crucial. It's not just about avoiding harm.
Right.
It's about proactively designing AI that benefits humanity and society as a whole.
Exactly. And one of the things that really struck me about this paper is that it emphasizes the importance of considering like the entire AI ecosystem.
Yeah, it's not just about the algorithms themselves.
Right. It's about the whole process, the people involved, the
Yeah.
impact on society.
And that's where this idea of stakeholders comes in.
Okay, so stakeholders, who we're talking about here.
Well, it's a pretty diverse group, actually. Obviously, you have the developers, the people who are actually coding the algorithms,
Right.
but it goes way beyond that.
Okay.
You have the companies that are using AI to build their products and services.
Yeah.
You have policymakers who are setting the rules.
Right.
And of course, you have the end users, the people who are actually interacting with these AI systems every day.
So like even me,
Yeah.
just using like a chat bot on a website or something.
Exactly. Or using a navigation app on your phone or getting recommendations from a streaming service. AI is everywhere, and it's impacting all of us in different ways.
So we're all stakeholders in a sense.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to think about RAI from a systemic perspective.
Okay, so the paper breaks down these stakeholders into three levels:
Yeah.
industry, organizational, and team.
Right. It helps to kind of like visualize the different layers of responsibility.
Okay, so let's start with the industry level. What does that encompass?
So the industry level is all about setting the ground rules for responsible AI across the board.
Hmm.
This is where you see things like regulations, standards, certifications, even like trust marks to signal to the public that an AI system is ethical.
So like the EU's AI Act, that's a good example, right?
Exactly. That's a great example. The EU AI Act is like a building code for high-risk AI systems. It sets very specific requirements for things like transparency, accountability, and human oversight.
And it's not just about avoiding harm, it's also about promoting positive use cases for AI, right?
Absolutely. There's a growing recognition that AI can be a powerful tool for good,
Hmm.
for addressing things like climate change or poverty or healthcare challenges.
And it's really interesting to see how different regions around the world are approaching AI regulation.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of variation, and we're still in the early stages, but it's clear that regulation is going to play a key role in shaping the future of RAI.
So we've got regulations, we've got standards. What about these trust marks you mentioned?
Yeah, trust marks are kind of like a seal of approval for AI systems.
Okay.
They're a way for companies to signal to consumers that their AI has been vetted and meets certain ethical criteria.
So it's like an organic label, but for AI.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
way to build trust and transparency.
Interesting. So these are all happening at the industry level.
Right. It's about setting the stage for a responsible AI ecosystem.
Okay, so then what about the organizational level? What's happening there?
So the organizational level is all about how individual companies or institutions are implementing REI principles within their own operations.
Okay.
This is where you see things like leadership commitment, ethics committees, training programs, and even dedicated AI ethics boards.
It's like companies are setting up their own internal Supreme Courts for algorithms.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. These ethics boards are responsible for reviewing AI systems, making sure they align with ethical standards, and addressing any potential concerns.
So it's not just about having a code of ethics, it's about actually putting it into practice.
Exactly, and that requires a real culture shift within organizations.
Right.
It's about making RAI everyone's responsibility, not just the responsibility of a small group of experts.
Okay, so we've got the industry level setting the ground rules, and then we've got the organizational level putting those rules into action.
Right.
So what about the team level? What's happening there?
So the team level is all about how individual teams of developers and engineers are building RAI principles into their day-to-day work.
Hmm.
This is where you see things like diverse teams to combat bias and customized agile development processes that include ethical considerations in every sprint.
So it's not just about Fixing problems after the fact. It's about building responsibility into the development process itself.
Precisely, it's about making RAI an integral part of the AI lifecycle.
Okay, so you're talking about things like diverse teams. Why is that so important?
Well, diversity is crucial for avoiding bias in AI systems. If you have a team of developers who all come from similar backgrounds and have similar perspectives, they're more likely to create AI that reflects those biases.
Yeah.
But if you have a team with a wide range of experiences and viewpoints, they're more likely to catch those biases and create AI that's more fair and equitable.
That makes a lot of
And
sense.
it's not just about diversity of demographics, it's also about diversity of thought. Having people on the team who are willing to challenge assumptions and ask tough questions.
So you're building a culture of ethical awareness right from the start.
Exactly. And that's really the key to building truly responsible AI.
This is really fascinating stuff, and it's making me think about all the different ways that REI is being implemented in the real world.
Oh, yeah. There are tons of examples out there.
Like I've heard of companies that are using AI to help with things like hiring decisions,
Right.
and they're using RAI principles to make sure that those systems are fair and don't discriminate against certain groups of people.
Absolutely. And there are companies using AI for things like loan applications or medical diagnoses.
Yeah.
And they're using RAI principles to make sure that those systems are transparent, accountable, and explainable so that people understand how those decisions are being made.
And that's so important because if you're going to trust an AI system to make decisions that impact your life, you need to know that it's being developed and used responsibly.
Absolutely. Trust is at the heart of RAI.
So we've got all these different stakeholders working at different levels to try to build this culture of trust around AI.
Right, it's a collaborative effort.
And it's not just about avoiding harm, it's about actually using AI to make the world a better place.
Yeah, exactly. That's the ultimate goal of RAI.
Well, this has been a great overview of the stakeholders involved in RAI and the different levels at which responsibility needs to be addressed.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But now I'm curious about how these principles actually translate into practice.
That's a great question, and that's where we'll dive in next time when we look at the specific patterns that this paper outlines for building and governing responsible AI systems.
Okay, so stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll get even more practical and explore how these RAI principles are being put into action.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so last time we were talking about all the different stakeholders involved in responsible AI.
Right, all the different players in the AI ecosystem.
Exactly, and we were looking at those 3 levels, industry, organizational, and team.
And how responsibility needs to be addressed at each of those levels.
Yeah, so now I'm curious, like, how do we actually put these principles into practice? Like, how do we build responsibility into the AI systems themselves?
That's a great question, and that's where these product patterns come in.
Product patterns.
Yeah, the paper calls them product patterns. They're like the building blocks for ethical AI.
Okay, so it's like we're moving from the how of development to the what of the AI product itself.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these product patterns.
Well, they operate at different levels of the AI system, like the supply chain, the system level, and the operational infrastructure.
Okay, so let's start with the supply chain. What kind of product patterns are we talking about there?
So one of the key patterns for the supply chain is transparency.
Transparency, okay.
Yeah, like knowing where the different components of the AI system came from. Like the training data, the algorithms, the hardware.
Right, so it's kind of like a bill of materials for AI.
Exactly, like listing the ingredients on a food label.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so you can see exactly what went into making the AI and where it all came from.
And that would help build trust, right? Like, if I know that the training data for a medical diagnosis AI came from a reputable source and was ethically sourced, I'd feel more comfortable using it.
Absolutely, transparency is crucial for building trust.
Okay, so we've got transparency. What else is there?
Well, there are also things like verifiable ethical credentials.
Verifiable ethical credentials. What are those?
So these are kind of like certificates that prove that an AI system or component meets certain ethical standards.
Oh, okay. So it's like a seal of approval for ethical AI.
Exactly. And these credentials can be cryptographically verified, so, they're legitimate.
So it's like a way to audit the AI supply chain and make sure that everything is ethically sound.
Precisely.
Okay, so we're talking about baking trust into the very foundation of the AI supply chain.
Right. It's about starting with ethical components.
Now, how do we build responsibility into the AI system itself?
So at the system level, we have patterns like the AI mode switcher and the multi-model decision maker.
Okay, those sound interesting. Tell me more.
So the AI mode switcher is basically a kill switch that allows a human operator to take control of the AI system if necessary.
Oh, okay, so it's like in those movies where the robots are going haywire and
Uh,
someone has to hit the big red button to shut them down?
yeah, kinda, but hopefully it wouldn't be quite that dramatic.
Right, of course.
But the idea is that there are certain situations where human judgment is still paramount, and you need to be able to take the AI offline.
Like with a self-driving car. If there's an unexpected situation on the road, you might want the human driver to take over. Okay, so that's the AI mode switcher. What about the multi-model decision maker?
So the multimodal decision maker uses multiple algorithms to make a decision.
Oh, so it's like getting a second opinion.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a panel of experts instead of just one.
And that helps to reduce bias and improve accuracy.
Precisely because each algorithm might have its own strengths and weaknesses, but by combining them, you can get a more robust and reliable outcome.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got the supply chain patterns
Yeah.
or the system level patterns. What about that third level, the operational infrastructure?
Right. So this is where we get into patterns like continuous ethical validation, ethical sandboxes, and ethical knowledge bases.
Okay, those sound pretty high tech. Break it down for me.
So continuous ethical validation is basically about monitoring the AI system in real time to make sure that it's still operating ethically.
So it's like having an AI ethics watchdog.
Exactly. It's constantly looking for any red flags that might indicate that the AI is drifting from its ethical guidelines.
And if it finds something,
Then it can alert the human operator so they can take corrective action.
okay, so that's continuous ethical validation. What about ethical sandboxes?
So an ethical sandbox is a safe space where you can test new AI components or updates without risking any harm to the real world.
Oh, okay, so it's like a virtual playground for AI.
Yeah, you can experiment with different scenarios and see how the AI behaves without any real-world consequences.
And that's important because with AI, you never know exactly how it's going to behave in the real world.
Right. It's a complex system with a lot of moving parts, and there's always the potential for unintended consequences.
So ethical sandboxes allow you to mitigate those risks.
Exactly.
And then what about ethical knowledge bases?
So an ethical knowledge base is basically a centralized repository of information about AI ethics.
So it's like a library for RAI.
Yeah, it contains things like principles, regulations, guidelines, best practices, case studies, all sorts of information that can help developers and other stakeholders make ethical decisions about AI.
So it's like having an ethical advisor at your fingertips.
Exactly, and it's a way to make sure that everyone is working from the same playbook when it comes to RAI.
These product patterns are really impressive. They seem to cover every stage of an AI system's existence.
And that's the goal, to build responsibility into the very fabric of AI.
So it's not just about following rules, it's about fostering a culture of ethical awareness throughout the entire AI lifecycle.
Exactly. RAI is everyone's responsibility.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different patterns for building responsible AI, from governance patterns to product patterns.
Right, a whole framework for RAI.
Yeah, but now I'm thinking about like the average person, the everyday user.
Mm.
Like, how does all this stuff actually impact them?
That's a great question, and it's important to remember that RAI isn't just about, technical solutions.
All right.
It's about values, human values.
Okay.
And those values need to be reflected in the AI systems that we create and use.
So it's not just about like making sure the AI doesn't do anything bad.
Right.
It's about making sure it actually does good.
Exactly. It's about making sure that AI aligns with our ethical principles and helps to create a better world.
Okay, so how can we as like individuals, make sure that happens?
Well, the good news is that you as an individual have a lot more power than you might think.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Your choices, your demands, your voice,
Mm-hmm.
they all matter.
Hmm.
By understanding these RAI principles, you become a more informed and empowered user of AI.
Okay, so give me an example. Like, how can I actually influence the direction of AI development?
Well, think about that loan application scenario we talked about earlier. Imagine you're denied a loan by an AI system.
Right.
In the past, you might have just felt powerless, like you couldn't understand or challenge the decision.
Mhm.
But now with RAI principles in place, you have the right to demand transparency.
Okay.
You can ask questions like, what factors were used in this decision? Was my data handled ethically? Was this decision fair and unbiased?
So I'm like holding the AI system accountable.
Exactly. And by doing that, you're not just advocating for yourself.
Right.
You're contributing to a broader movement toward trustworthy AI.
That's really empowering.
It is, and companies are starting to pay attention. They're realizing that trust is essential for the success of their AI products.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when you demand transparency and accountability, you're sending a powerful message.
And it's not just about like individual actions,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like we can also advocate for better regulations and policies around AI.
Absolutely. We can engage in public discourse, contact our elected officials, support organizations that are championing RAI.
Yeah.
We can use our collective voice to shape the future of AI.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. It's about individual action and collective action working together.
And it's an ongoing process, right? Like
Yeah.
AI is constantly evolving.
Oh, definitely. And as AI gets more sophisticated, the ethical challenges are only going to become more complex.
But we need to stay informed and engaged.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and let AI happen to us.
Right.
We need to actively shape it to make sure it serves humanity.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. It's made me realize that RAI is something that we all need to be thinking about and talking about.
It really is. It's one of the most important issues of our time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
I think the key takeaway is that RAI is everyone's responsibility. It's not just for tech experts or policymakers.
Right.
We all have a role to play in making sure that AI is a force for good in the world.
That's a powerful message. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been really insightful, and I hope our listeners will join us next time for another deep dive into the world of AI.